What immediately tells you someone is a trashy parent? Story 1. Your adult children don't talk to you and you don't know why. I told my parent for over 20 years her behavior was breaking the family bonds, and sooner or later I would cease to care about her well-being entirely. Now that we're past that point, I'm supposedly the a-hole for not just ignoring and forgiving years of unapologetic physical and mental abuse that still continues if given a chance to interact. ETA. Wow, this has some legs. Lots of people seem to know the feeling. For the record, my mom was severely abused growing up, which is also her reason why nothing she's ever done to anyone else is abuse. You call that abuse? Mine was worse. Yeah. Be well, people. I remember telling my mother about 10 years ago that I would stop loving her completely if she continued the way she was going. She made a big show of wailing for herself in response, to get sympathy from my siblings. I didn't even know at the time that it was possible to stop loving your parents, but it 100% was. Now, I just see her as just any other person who I have to politely but distantly interact with. Or the parent blames the child. My mom has the entire extended family convinced she's a saint. She's an abusive monster that belongs in prison. Meanwhile, my brother talks to her because he's an alcoholic junkie who wants to mooch off the family wealth, but he also didn't really talk to either of our parents for basically his whole 20s. And my family calls me crazy or unstable or a liar or whatever for calling her a monster without hard evidence beyond all the physical scars, because, you know, that's something children of abuse often have, paperwork showing they were abused. My mom still likes to blame me, but only privately, for stuff that would be war crimes if she weren't my parent, and she wonders why I don't want to be friends with her. This is the biggest sign, and it sucks because it's too late for an intervention at this point. Story 2. Zero interest in the kid. Doesn't care what they do or what happens to them as long as they don't inconvenience them. When my family moved to my current city when I was in high school, the school I enrolled in had the reputation of being a disposal for kicked out kids. Basically, I had a lot of rich classmates who had attitude problems, too much allowance, and extremely neglectful parents. We had 2 separate incidents of 15-year-old classmates getting gonorrhea from sleeping with prostitutes. Some classmates frequent bars and men's clubs even though they were very much underage. One kid brought a bottle of expensive vodka to school, and she and a boy drank it all in one sitting. A boy ran over an old lady with his car. Some of them felt like they were untouchable. The parents thought a lot of things could be resolved by money. There are some who had nannies go to school instead of the parents when the school asked them to disciplinary discussions. We were 3 siblings raised by a single mother with a village that cared. Who would have thought that we were so much luckier than they were? My school held a vigil for 3 students who wrapped their car around a tree going 140 kilometers per hour in a school zone while impaired. All 3 had blood alcohol contents way above the legal limit for an adult and were not good kids, but gifted athletes. They were the kids of some well-off families in the area, so of course everyone was heartbroken by it. I got in trouble and scolded tenfold for pointing out the hypocrisy of the situation. My father is an alcoholic, so I might have been a bit jaded towards drunken stupidity. I'm 25 now, and this happened like 2 or 3 years ago, but some guys who I went to high school with, and are pretty known for their drinking and partying habits, wrapped their car around a telephone pole. Not before they crashed through a fence, part of a house and a yard, and the fact that they hit all that before the pole and were still literally wrapped around the pole tells you how fast they were going. Of course, because they were popular guys in high school and at all the local bars, everybody was like, oh no, those poor boys. And I'm like, is literally anyone else concerned that they took out a whole fence, backyard, and a chunk of a house? Is anyone else concerned about what they could have done to other people? So now, because the one who died was a BMX athlete, they have a painted white bike hanging off the pole they crashed into. Every time I see it, I can't help but roll my eyes. I just can't and don't feel bad when acting like an a-hole gets you killed. Former pre-K teacher here. There are so many parents who have kids as accessories because their friends have kids. They usually are the same parents who say, oh, they don't do that at home. Oh, I don't know where he heard that word, or laughs off super inappropriate behavior. I'm going to add an edit. I mean it as saying that and not correcting the behavior. There's a difference between parents who say they never do that / don't hear that from us and let their child know, hey, you can't do that at school, we can't do that. And parents who say they never do that or don't hear that and then shrug it off. Their kid does no wrong. It's the same difference between parents who treat teachers as an extension of their child's support system and the ones who treat teachers as the help. Story 3. Mothers who see their daughters as competition. This is how my wife's stepmom was to her. Dad always agreed with stepmom, and my wife got kicked out when she was 17. Stepmom accused my wife of stealing a pair of socks, and apparently that's all that was needed to kick her out. Sounds like my friend from college. She was the youngest with 2 older brothers. The brothers were treated like saints, but she was treated like an obligation for literally no reason. Absolutely dunked on by her mom. She was finally booted from the house at 18 for not reacting positively enough to the sexy Jesus painting her mother commissioned for like $12,000. I kid you not, it was a naked Jesus moaning on the cross with 0% body fat, absolutely yoked. She paid her way through college despite her family being worth millions and living in RPV Los Angeles. They never gave her a dime. Her family is wild. Sexy Jesus is just one of many crazy things I've learned. I asked my therapist why this happens so much, as it has with me and so many other women I know. She said the mom projects all of her life's regrets and ups and downs and insecurities on this newer, better version of herself. That's what she sees. And it's hypercritical of you as the daughter, when really it's all about them being critical of themselves. Made sense. My mom had a habit of saying I was weak, pitiful, and ridiculous always. She'd mock me in front of anyone who was around. I remember once a doctor suggested they take me to see a therapist at 10 years of age because of anxiety, and my mom openly mocked the therapist and said, "Boo-hoo, I'm a big monster, huh?" Then called me weak. The therapist's look gave me insight that maybe I wasn't crazy. It's hard healing, but you have to try. Mom would often say she hated me because I was a clone of my dad and she resented him so much. That's just rough, and it's way more common than you would think. Story 4. Take the emotions of your child, first crushes, embarrassing moments that they talked with you about, are unsure about, worries they have, etc., and use it at a family gathering to get a laugh out of everybody. Your child will be so embarrassed because of you and will not talk to you in the future. I'm 30 and my mother still does this to me sometimes. The difference today is that I will talk back in front of the whole family and suddenly she is embarrassed. Oh man, my mom likes to tell difficult moments of my life when I was a child like they're a joke to people. She was telling my siblings' partners' parents, while we were there to meet them, about the time she had to send me away to live with her friends because we were gonna be homeless, and my sibling was a baby, so she kept them with her. And I was so upset about the whole thing and jealous of my baby sibling, and how funny my jealousy was because they were babies, and I was a 10-year-old. They were like, wow. It was a pretty awkward dinner. Once around Christmas, my mother, rest in peace, had a couple of her friends over. I was a young adult at the time and visiting. She brought up the story. Well, I'll just repeat the exchange. "Born, you remember that time you pulled a knife on me?" said my mother in an attempt to gain the sympathy of her friends and or to embarrass me. I waited a few silent, stunned seconds and replied, "Yeah, I do remember when I was 13 years old and you were hitting me with a bike chain and had to grab the kitchen knife to back you off so I could get outside and away from you." My mother's face screwed up in horror and her typical victimhood and cried in pain. I kid you not, she said, "I can't believe you would bring that up in front of company," and burst into tears. When I was in my 20s, any person I was serious about enough to bring home, my mom thought was a great opportunity to bag on me in front of. It was embarrassing and a little demoralizing, but I thought, I'm an adult, I can take a little healthy criticism, and tried to laugh it off. One day, I reluctantly brought home a new boyfriend, and when my mom tried the usual, he looked confused and said, "I'm sorry, I don't find that funny." That's it. Simple and to the point. My mom looked like she just found out she was an a-hole, because she did, and I'll never forget the look on her face. She doesn't do that anymore, and I've been married to the guy for 16 years. Yeah, don't bag on your kids in front of other people for laughs. It just makes you a bully, and you're the one who's supposed to protect your kids from bullies. This is also a sign of a terrible older sibling. Story 5. Parents who can't apologize to a child. It's okay to have human emotions and moments to be triggered or struggling and lash out, or be wrong, but for the love of all things good, apologize and change. My dad is a good dad. He can be very tough and yell at you and never admit he's wrong. He can make you feel 3 inches tall, but he always sees the error of his ways and admits his mistakes and apologizes always. My mom is quiet and very controlled and passive-aggressive. She comes across as fair and gentle. I'm 43 years old, and even after doing or saying terrible things to me, her only child, things when my dad and her friends even tell her are wrong, or she owes me an apology, she has never apologized to me ever in 43 years. She will apologize to my dad or friends, but not to me, and she's never admitted to me she was wrong and I was right. When my parents apologized to me, whether it was something they did directly to me or simply a poor decision they made, but they knew I saw them make, it definitely made an impact on me. Yes, I learned things when I saw them do the right thing, but seeing them mess up and own up about it, that's what really stuck with me. Story 6. Someone who treats the child from their old marriage like crap because they're no longer with that child's parent. One of my employees had this happen. Her parents both basically moved on from their old lives when she was 5. Her mom ran off to Australia with some guy she met online, and her dad remarried and moved hours away. Neither of them wanted her. She went with one grandma for a while, then the other, then lived with dad for a while who assaulted her, and then back with grandma. It wasn't until she was an adult that she felt comfortable enough to talk about the assault. She never told anyone when it was happening, and her grandma, dad's mom, told her she must have invited that kind of attention. After all of that, she is the sweetest, most loving person I've ever met. She's had some rough relationships, but she's turned a corner and seems to be blossoming. That's really how it is. The ones who have been through the most trauma are the ones who are most selfless, patient, and empathetic. One of my best friends has had a pretty crazy childhood. He's trained almost his entire life in martial arts, and I mean he could do some serious damage to somebody if he were to fight you, but he is probably the most patient and loving person I've ever met, and would do anything for people, even though people have always let him down. Ah yes, my stepmonster. She constantly deletes and blocks my number from my dad's phone. This last time I've finally given up. We've always had to hide seeing each other or talking on the phone, and he only lives 2 hours away. He's seen my son maybe 3 times his whole life. Don't ask for pics, had her kids and grandkids plastered all over social media. Nothing of my sister and I and his blood grandkids. My dad just allows it. No plans on changing, so I finally gave up when I was blocked again a few weeks ago. Story 7. Pulling the, I guess I'm the worst parent in the world when approached by their child with a question, actively making the child feel guilty for expressing their own opinions in an effort to make themselves feel better. Ugh, my mother-in-law would do this to my husband when he was a kid or teen. Emotional manipulation at its finest. And it messed with his head as a kid. Went on for years. She finally did it to him when he was like 19 and he popped off with, "Yeah, I guess you are." It never happened again because that wasn't what she wanted to hear. I used to just sit there quietly and let my bio mom make her own opinions on what my response was. She did not like that. Did the same when she started doing the, "Do you do insert random action behavior activity at your dad's?" Most often, it was a direct reflection of her behavior and I would do it at my dad's, but as anger directed towards her. Damn, did she hate when I was silent and stone-faced for that too. My favorite was, after sending her a text message with dozens of crap I had bottled up for years, she just replied with, "I'm the worst mom in the world. Have I done anything right?" To which I replied, "Well, you didn't beat me, so thanks for not physically abusing me on top of emotionally abusing me." She didn't respond. When I was 3, my dad started giving me scalding hot baths. I'm talking steam was rising up from the tub, and the second water touched my skin, I became itchy. I began running away butt naked and he would chase me to get me into the tub. I begged and cried while standing in the water and he'd scream at me to sit down. I began scratching my private parts for relief in public, in daycare, at the dinner table, etc. My teachers and mother scolded me and eventually my parents took me to a strange doctor in a white coat who wanted me to open my legs. Nobody explained what was happening and they had to hold me down so I could have a gynecologist exam at age 3 or 4. Well, I suppressed all these memories for years until age 8, when I started talking about my memories with Dad, and when I mentioned how the baths he would draw for me were way too hot. He yelled at me, "Oh, so you're saying it's my fault, huh?" I was forced to console his ego. I tried to talk about this again during college with my mother, and she awkwardly shut the topic down. Story 8. My daughter's teacher called one day to tell us our daughter was bullying another student so relentlessly that he was afraid to come to school. We talked to our daughter and she had no idea what we were talking about. Whenever we asked the teacher for the student's name, she actually gave it to us. Turns out I know his mother from high school, so I called her and talked with her, and at first she had no idea what I was talking about. Then she suddenly remembered everything and told me this long story about how her son was afraid of my daughter, blah blah blah. I talked with one of this lady's friends a few days later, and she told me that this lady confessed to her that she just doesn't get enough sleep, always misses her alarms in the morning, and just doesn't get up to take her kids to school. Her first instinct when the school called her to talk about absences was to blame my daughter for bullying her kid. I know a parent who can't get his kid to school on time hardly ever. His kid is sick at least 5 school days a month, if not way more frequently. This a-hole won't put her on a bus either because that'll be like admitting he's doing something wrong and that his kid hasn't had a chronic cold for 3 years. Dude's definitely got some personality disorder tendencies, narcissistic and BPD. The worst part is how it's affecting the kid's development. She's constantly making up excuses and even lying to cover for him. Whoa, you may have solved an almost 30-year-old mystery in my life. A teacher once threatened to send me to the principal's office, basically jail in my tiny mind, if she got one more complaint. She didn't give any specifics. Were parents complaining? Students? And what could it have possibly been about? I had been existing in a depression bubble, so basically I had been pretty quiet and kept to myself, aside from being completely caught off guard and perplexed by her accusations. All I could think was that apparently my mere existence was wrong and at some point I would be sent to the principal's office because of it. This planted a seed that I have yet to shake, unfortunately. Many times I have thought about finding her to ask what that had been all about, but I'm sure this interaction was a blip in her career and has long been forgotten. Still haven't ruled out hunting down some of those classmates to see if they knew what the deal was. She probably spent less than 60 seconds yelling at me, but damn, it has clung to me for literally decades. Story 9. Punishing kids with haircuts, less food, less attention, or taking their door, especially for things like asking too many questions or talking back just because they didn't understand something and wanted a real reason or explanation on why they had to or could not do something. My mother loves to tell 2 stories. One, when I was 2 months old, I did something to piss her off, so she took me to Walmart to get my ears pierced. The other was when I was 6. My hair was long past my waist. She got upset that I didn't want to come home from my dad's house, so she cut all of my hair off. Shaved heads were a matter of course in my home. For anything, I'd come home from school with any kind of infraction and my stepdad would greet me as I walked in the door with, "What's up, Baldy?" That's honestly kinda tame compared to some of the other stuff they put us through, though. I still remember the young girl a few years ago who took her own life after her father cut her hair as a punishment, and filmed her after he'd cut it off, and then the video started circulating online. I think they believed that the father didn't intentionally post it online for the world to see. He allegedly filmed it to serve as a reminder for the girl, but the girl shared the video with one of her friends and then it started circulating online. But still, if he hadn't cut her hair in the first place, none of it would have happened. And even if the video hadn't been online, she must have felt so violated when he did that to her and had to go to school and be humiliated when all of her classmates saw her haircut. She had reportedly already been bullied at school and had been suffering from some mental health issues before her dad cut her hair. So then, what he did just to punish her was over the edge. Story 10. Putting soda in a baby bottle. I've seen parents give their kids a can of pop, then an hour later lose their minds on the kid because they're bouncing off the walls and misbehaving. Like, dude, it's your fault. Don't get mad at them because you pumped their tiny body full of sugar and caffeine that they can't handle. I work in behavioral health and saw an amazing amount of people bring in kids, get them soda and candy from the vending machine, and then get mad when they were told the issue is behavioral and not a mental illness. We aren't here to make anyone's kids behave. No one's kid needs a Mountain Dew and Skittles for a snack. Unfortunately, this happens a lot in impoverished areas. I have a couple of friends who have worked in the dental industry, and 2-year-olds would come in and have to get all their teeth pulled because they were completely rotted out. The parents would put Kool-Aid, Pepsi, juice, etc. in bottles and didn't know they had to brush their teeth. It's awful, and they just didn't know it was bad, especially if their parents did it with them. I've seen this happen way too often. Parents feed their kids junk to get them to shut up. Story 11. When their adult children have gone no contact. I've always had a not-so-warm relationship with my mother. One Christmas while I was in college, I was feeling down, so I called her, and she was too busy to talk with me. She said that she would call back when she had some time. That was 25 years ago, and she never called back. I'm over it, but I can't imagine being in her shoes, and my now 8-year-old son would be 20 and go off into the world, and I would never see or hear from him again. The thought scares me and keeps me up at night. My parents got divorced when I was 13, now 41. I didn't have the greatest relationship with my dad, but I didn't feel I had any reason to hate him. After the divorce, I only ever saw him on holidays. He'd always complain that we didn't have a relationship, but I couldn't get him to understand it was because he literally didn't try. He promised to go do things, then never show. He'd occasionally drive past the house and honk, but not stop. He's been married twice since, and I've never met either of my stepmoms. He's never met my current wife. I have zero use for him, and I always contemplate whether I'll even go to his funeral. All of this was just because he couldn't make an ounce of effort. The worst part is, I just realized recently that I'm currently the age he was when they divorced. I imagine the mindset I'd be in during a similar situation, and I just don't get it. All this to say, I've gone no contact, but not necessarily on my own volition. If I know him like I think I do, he's portrayed himself as the victim to anyone who will listen if asked about it. Story 12. They cry about being poor and can't feed their kids, then immediately get a crappy tattoo of their dog on their arm. I knew a family that had 8 children. All their teeth were rotting out. Every kid needed intensive dental work, but instead they were covered head to toe in tattoos, and every time the kid turned 16, they paid for entire sleeves. They also went to Disneyland every single year. Or guns, or cats they can't afford. When I worked at an insurance agency, I used to have people whine to me about how their insurance was so expensive. They couldn't feed their kids, but they drove a next model year sports car and bragged about how many weapons they owned. And every month was the same. I would say this demographic made up about 20% of our customer base. If you're not spending as many resources as you can on your kids, you're not parenting right. Story 13. This is very, very specific, but had both parents bring in their 6-year-old boy and their other younger kid to our ED. Mom and the 6-year-old were checking in. He had cut his toe several days ago, and I guess hadn't told them. Parents refused to help him answer questions, and not in a "we're fostering independence" way. Not only was their refusal to help him hold up triage and make other parents wait longer, but they were so belittling. "Talk, what's wrong with you? You don't know how to answer her questions?" To me, "Well, he did this 2 days ago apparently, but didn't tell us, so now he's made it worse and is inconveniencing the whole family." Mom was also checking in for a literal pregnancy test. They didn't even offer to help out when asked if he was up to date on his tetanus shot, as though their vaccine schedule is something most 6-year-olds keep track of. To add to this, there were several other patients in triage screaming or vomiting, which I'm quite sure made a stranger asking him questions that seemed to get him punished every time he answered even more overwhelming. I took them to the back. The nurse that had them said the parents completely ignored their children, knocking on other patients' doors and running away, playing on stretchers, etc. Also said the dad, not a patient, stood in the hallway shaking a cup of ice, at no one in particular, and when she walked by to go into an actual patient's room, he loudly went, "Well, I guess I'll just walk over here and get my own water since no one wants to get me any." Not once did he ask for any water, and he was also standing 5 feet away from a water machine that is freely available to patients, and that he had used before. Gonna get myself riled up all over again because the entitlement is my pet peeve. But treating your child like this in a situation that is scary and unfamiliar when they are already in pain is despicable to me. I work in healthcare. I had a woman once speaking over her 14-year-old who was the patient. I had a couple of sensitive/personal questions, and the mom kept butting in and answering all of the questions. Finally, I had it. Looked at the mom and flatly said, "I'm asking the patient." She looked at me like I'm a psycho and demanded to talk to our clinic manager. I said, "Okay," and walked back out with the manager tag on. That's when you approach the dad and baby them in a very over-the-top manner. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. We didn't know you were disabled and couldn't use the water machine right in front of you. Have you lost your mom or guardian in the crowd? Because we can call them on the intercom system to help you find them." Damn, I've grown so spiteful about these kinds of people because of working in customer service. Since it's a government service, I can actually get away with telling people it's their own responsibility sometimes, and let me tell you, it is very vindicating. Story 14. The kid is morbidly obese, and the parents feed them nothing but fast food, soft drinks, and says he won't eat anything else. My sister did this to her kids. They were both so obese as children and wouldn't eat regular meals. I had them for a week, and with some creativity I got them to like food that wasn't candy and garbage. Now they're adults and have lost the weight on their own, but have so much loose, sagging skin and stretch marks everywhere. Feel very sad for them. I go eat lunch occasionally with my kids at school and see this pretty regularly. Kids that are in kindergarten or first grade and must weigh as much as I do drinking a large soda from McDonald's. I honestly think it's child abuse. It breaks my heart knowing the years it could take from their lives. Yep, that's my ex-sister-in-law. I still remember Easter when her toddler-age son ate 3 bags of Doritos, a Mountain Dew, and a slice of cake for dinner because he wouldn't eat any of the totally normal food that was prepared for dinner. He'll eat it if you don't start giving him that trash until he's old enough to have self-control. And/or if you say, not hungry for ham, peas, scalloped potatoes, and greens, that's okay, it'll still be fine to eat in the morning for breakfast. Kids can have preferences, and it's important to be respectful of them, but you can't let them dictate to you that they only eat whatever garbage they want. Be a parent, people. Story 15. Having a partner who dislikes or mistreats their children. This. 100 times this. My partner has a child. I do not like small kids and have never wanted any kids because of it. I'll admit, the first 2 to 3 years were a struggle and I didn't know if I could deal with it. It's much better now that she's 7 and can interact without being overwhelmed. I actually really enjoy being around her now. That said, she will never know, see, or feel that. I was and am very intentional in making sure I was nice to her, never yelled at her, made her feel loved, etc. Retrospectively, I genuinely wonder how my parents can say they wanted kids and loved kids when they were so mean to me. Like, holy cow, here I have a kid who wasn't mine, who at the time genuinely made me miserable, and I was so much nicer to her than my parents who wanted me ever were to me. Seeing that contrast was a large part of what made me realize how messed up my childhood was. Or even a partner who can't handle you, still co-parent with your ex. Like, sure, if you don't have kids with someone and you break up or divorce, you may never ever speak to them again, maybe. But if you've got kids with a person, you will literally always be tied to each other. Being with someone who is threatened by that and interferes in the co-parenting relationship is still messing with your kid, too. Story 16. Seeing children who are obviously not well cared for. I was behind a mom and her infant in line at a gas station, and the smell of cigarette smoke, cat pee, and just unwashed bodies and dirty clothes emanating from them was eye-watering from 3 feet away. I could only imagine the state of their house. Poor baby. It couldn't have been a year old yet. My stepdaughter is a school teacher in rural Missouri, and she was just telling me about how many kids stink so bad from all you mentioned. It just infuriates her that parents can't be better than that. Something so basic. Story 17. Saw a little girl of about 4 or 5 walking into a pizzeria with her parents who were arguing. Her hair was so matted, it was starting to dread in the back. I had my teen daughter with me. We both just wanted to take the little girl home with us. Edit. To add. The parents had an aura of being active drug users. This wasn't accidental matting. I felt terrible, but I guess the good side is that they were together. Well, I hope the parents get the help they need. Story 18. When I was younger, I saw a mother and a little daughter on a train. The mother was scrolling her phone and the daughter was bored and started a song. It was very quiet singing and she had a good voice. No problem. But the mom started to hush her daughter to stop singing. Then the daughter asked, does her mother love her? Can she get a hug? Something? Mother just told her to be quiet and kept scrolling. It hurt me. I wish I could just have stood up and hugged that little kid. Show her that she is not alone, that she is loved no matter what. But a 20-something dude hugging a little girl on a train seemed to be wrong to me at that time, so I just cried a little bit, silently. And I think about that little girl and how her life is even years later. I sometimes really hate some parents because they seem to be kids themselves without any clue about pretty much anything. Empathy. I wish more people had it. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have a similar story that you feel comfortable sharing with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave us a like and don't forget to subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again and see you next time.